Hi, Mrs. Product Reviews here, and I created a slide deck for you on red light therapy because I wanted to know more about this, and I wanted to know precisely because I'm kind of a wonk when it comes to this, and there's a lot of us out there. So come along for the ride. So what's red light therapy? Well, it's got a lot of different names. It's all the same thing. And it's been around a lot longer than people think. In the 1960s was when it really started to happen by accident. It was through the application of laser. And instead of it being contraindicated, it turned out to be very therapeutic. And that was not expected. So, hence the beginning of an entirely new understanding, even though heliotherapy or sun therapy had been around for centuries, probably over 1,000 years, but without the isolation of the red light. So photobiomodulation is exactly what it says. It's light, photo. It's physically, the bio, modulating or making exquisitely precise changes, and that's modulation. So I love that word because it's so accurate. But photomedicine, much quicker, and it's a very therapeutic term for a very therapeutic modality. And low-level light therapy, also known or used to be known as low-level laser therapy. But low level, nowadays it refers to the energy that's used. Now, all of these things, it's biological alterations or changes in organisms due to photon interactions on atoms and the molecules. Whether you find a little baby bird with a hurt wing, or you've had a crushed ankle, or you're on kidney dialysis, any of those things, near infrared light can do amazing things, and painless, wonderful. So by shining red low-level wavelengths into the skin, red light therapy helps naturally jumpstart. It really activates the process of tissue recovery and other forms of skin rejuvenation. Because living day to day, we have interactions with various caustic environments. We might call them smog. We might be, that new car smell. That's actually off-gassing of various teratogenic chemicals in the plastic. We call it new car smell. It has status to us, but it's not good. And this is what we're doing, is we are resetting our life with the red light. We're increasing blood flow with the red light, the recovery, collagen stimulation. That's the collagen, that's the structure of the underlying foundation of the tissue, cartilage, DNA repair. Remember I mentioned that new car smell and teratogenic effects from such toluenes and butylenes and such. That I don't know about those specific chemicals, but the DNA damage that can occur from modern living, it does end up being repaired through the cascade events that the red light activates. So then, of course, it reduces the appearance of scars, and it does so much more. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So red light is considered low, like I mentioned earlier, because it works at an energy density that's low compared to laser therapies, which were among the first to be applied precisely and consciously. And it's through this precise control of wavelengths the red light therapy is a whole new method to control cells and organisms by inducing a change by knowingly exposing body parts, tissue, organisms to precise wavelengths that are known to have a certain effect. You do this, you get that. Now I keep mentioning the light nanometers and the wavelengths, and most of you have probably seen this image before, if not in your high school science textbook, somewhere here on the web. But red light therapy, of course, occurs within the visible red, far infrared, as well as the invisible near infrared light. So you see this entire light spectrum, most of it, almost the entirety of it, is invisible. You'll also notice it goes from very, very tiny short wavelengths to extremely long wavelengths that are used in broadcast and radio and TV that go over long distances, hence the long wavelength being ideal for that. And then that tiny little bit of visible light and an even smaller subsection, which is the red, and the near infrared, and of course there's far infrared. And each of the sections within the red light spectrum has a very specific response to biological systems. And how does that work? This was my own research. I was just so excited by the implications. So amazingly important is red light therapy is a way to stimulate or to stop biological processes of all kinds. It can be very precise. And it's working through what's called the cellular respiration that occurs in living cells. So cellular respiration, it's a metabolic reaction, just like you and I breathe in, we breathe out, we take in nourishment, we take in liquid, we expel the waste, we breathe in air, we breathe out the waste air that's depleted of oxygen and has higher concentrations of CO2. It's our respiration. And on a cellular level, the same thing happens, but within these little mitochondria, these power packs, which are within the cells. So they're even smaller than a cell. So this is cellular respiration, is cells breathing in and out, eating, growing, and peeing, to be somewhat vulgar, but you understand. Now, what these processes do, just like I described a moment ago, is they convert biochemical energy, which is food, it's liquid that we take in, and as it converts and is filtered through the body, it's the biochemical energy that it turns all this into ATP, or into energy, which is this is what our life is driven by. It's for energy, to breathe, to live, for growth, for repair. It's everything for biological activity. So red light therapy, it delivers light from the biologically active wavelengths of 660 and 850. Now, 850 is where we're often finding some of the most active, but there's a lot of studies out there. And if you're like me, you start getting into PubMed, you start getting into Google Scholar, start really digging, you're going to see that certain wavelengths within the near infrared, which is the 800 spectrum, will have specific applications. Everything from kidneys, people who are on kidney dialysis, to gynecological applications, and we're still finding out more. Red light therapy is like a wild west. It's we're learning the rules, we're asking questions, we're getting feedback through all this research that we have such an abundance of. It's only recently, in the last 12 years, is being used to create products to enhance life, make us better, healthier, enhanced human beings through this. And yet it's been going on for 30 years, longer. So the 660 does not go very far into the skin, the penetration and the absorption. It's really mostly used for enhancing the surface of the skin, but there are indications that there's a lot more going on. We still don't know all the receptor sites and the way everything is connected, because some people are showing indications of increased brain activity, increased cognitive function, even from the exposure of 660. And then of course in the 880s, 850s, it goes much deeper, up to 20 centimeters, which is deep into the body. And when they're used together, you're getting both at the same time. That is powerful. So you could be improving your kidney function while you're also improving the surface of the skin. It has better tissue perfusion from the blood. You're seeing a better color. You're seeing an initiated event that goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks that can start to increase the tone through the collagen. A better appearance of the skin, because now any kind of dysfunctional mitochondria within the cells on the skin, they've had the little nitric oxide popped off of their electron chain transport, and now they're starting to function again and breathe in and breathe out through their little mitochondria. They're doing their thing because they got exposed. How long it goes on? Hard to tell. But multiple exposures just keep, once you get the ball rolling, you keep it rolling, and you start to see compounding and improving benefits. That was a long tangent I just went on. Clearly I'm excited about this. So as I just sort of gave it away the last slide, the nitric oxide, which is an important part, it's an important signaling chemical in your body. But too much of a good thing, just like a glass of water is welcomed on a hot day, sticking your head in a pool and not being able to pull it up is just the opposite. It's just too much of a good thing. So stress, illness, bad health, they create an overabundance of nitric oxide. And then the nitric oxide goes where it shouldn't. And like I mentioned, that's when there's too much of it, and it will bind to the electron transport chain. Now I keep referring to the mitochondria, and your cell can have many mitochondria, not just one or two. It can have 50 to hundreds. It's just depending on the nature of that particular cell. But individual mitochondria can just stop working. It's like putting a cork in a bottle. There's no way that air is going to get into that bottle. The cork or the nitric oxide is just sealing it off. And so when the red light is exposed to the skin and it's absorbed into the surface of the skin or deeper into the body, depending on the wavelength, whether it's in the 660s or the 850s and 880s, it absorbs and causes the nitric oxide to pop off. And the electron transport chain, which is allowing the intake of bionutrients and biochemicals into the mitochondria, now resumes. It kickstarts it back into production. And that is where you start to get the ATP production. So instead of, let's say, having a cell with only, let's say a cell has 100 mitochondria in it and only about 50 to 60 of them are active, with 40% in it's called a mitochondrial dysfunction. They're just too much nitric oxide. All of a sudden, this jump starts all of them. They're kick-started back into production, and all of a sudden you have, let's say, 100% of the mitochondria functioning and producing ATP. That's energy. And that will allow the cell and the multicellular organism, which is you and I, to feel better and to have more energy. And we may not be able to tell you what's going on. We can just say, I feel better. I have more energy. And that's more energy for everything: thinking, growing, interacting, repairing, just everything. And of course, this whole thing occurs very, very painlessly. And of course, if the mitochondria doesn't have any kind of a rescue event, for lack of a better word, that would restart those mitochondria that have no activity, it can go down to where there's so few mitochondria producing energy for that cell, the cell just dies. Well, the mitochondria dies, and then the cell can die too. And that is, of course, very, very bad, to be avoided. So I kind of mentioned this big scary word called the electron transport chain, or the ETC. And this is a vital molecular life. There's something called cytochrome C oxidase. So cytochrome C oxidase, it binds to the oxygen, and it all happens in the membrane of the mitochondria in the electron transport chain. And when there's nitrogen oxide that binds to it, like I mentioned earlier, it's like stuffing a cork in a bottle, and all energy production stops. So science generally accepts that red light therapy is triggered by light absorption by the cytochrome C oxidase inside the mitochondria or the cell membrane. So red light therapy, it causes the nitric oxide to pop off and ATP production to resume. Clearly, I've kind of gotten ahead of myself. I got excited. But you're hearing this again and again, and now you're kind of seeing this. This is biochemistry, so it's kind of frightening, but you don't need to understand this. Let's go on back. What you really need to know, I've put here. You don't have to focus on anything else. So essentially, you're seeing the nitric oxide that's binding. There's no oxygen. You want the oxygen there, but because they've got the nitric oxide that's there, it's preventing it. But once the light is absorbed in, it causes it to release, and then the oxygen combine and production starts up. So many people find it hard to believe that the red light therapy works, since you can't feel anything. You can see the red light, and it gets a little bit warm, kind of like a warm bath, but it doesn't have a strong, it doesn't hurt. It's not strongly discernible. It's not like getting a surgery, which we know is usually for repairing, and it's very big and dramatic, and you have evidence of what happened. It's very subtle, and so it's really hard to believe that it's that effective. We've come to believe in our society that in order for something to be effective, it has to be dramatic and very discernible immediately. And when it's gentle, it could not possibly be working. And that is actually wrong, especially when it comes to red and near-infrared light. Because this light triggers, I've referred to it before, it's a cascading event in many different biochemical and neurochemical responses that can go in the body, that can go on for weeks and weeks and weeks, from just a single exposure. Just imagine if you had a regular schedule of daily or 3 or 4 times a week, and all of this was allowed to build upon itself. So is red light therapy effective? You bet. It absolutely is. And it's so effective that NASA, who accidentally rediscovered this through LEDs that were being used to grow food in space back in the 90s. So up to that point, there was an understanding that low-level laser therapy was effective, but we only knew it as lasers. So NASA, with their red LEDs and the light spectrum of 660, they were lightweight. The plants liked it, they absorbed it, they helped grow. It was just discovered that it worked on the people who had various injuries and illnesses that were going on that do not heal properly in space because of the gravity not being what is typical on planet Earth. And that was actually pushed along. So NASA invested a great deal into this once they figured out what was going on. And they pioneered this, and then it jumped into the private sector. So Professor Harry Whelan at the Space Medicine Laboratory in 1998, he was the one who figured out, well, actually he didn't figure it out, but he demonstrated that what was anecdotally being noticed at the space station by astronauts out there tending to our space crops. He then demonstrated it unequivocally that the LEDs were in fact strong enough, and they didn't have to be big and dramatic and eviscerating the way that a laser could, and they still got the responses. So lasers, they're also called ablative or cutting, and they're expensive, and that was among the things that really did not advance the industry, because they were expensive and we thought it was the only way. And then little old humble light emitting diodes, or LEDs, opened the door, and that changed the history. It revolutionized the study of photomedicine, and it really study of low-level light therapy. And currently, there's over 30 countries are publishing scholarly research and are actually doing good medicine using photobiomodulation, red light therapy. They're looking at LEDs and OLEDs, referred to as OLEDs. You look that one up. The US, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, South Korea, England, Germany, Russia, just to name a few. There's some amazing stuff that's going on out there in the world. And even though politically these different countries have their standoffishness in the sciences, scientists really rely on each other around the globe. So a lot is being shared very openly, much more than you'd ever expect. And it's really very reassuring. So is red light therapy effective? You bet. It's so effective that there are areas of medicine, health, athletic performance, and beauty that are literally hundreds of peer-reviewed research published every week, more all the time. And you've, of course, if you're reading this, you are probably also familiar with Dr. Michael Handlin and Harvard Medical School, Harvard MIT Division of Health and Science Technology. There's the Michael Hamblin connection. The Wellman Center for Photomedicine at Massachusetts General Hospital. Again, Dr. Michael Hamblin, he has been doing this for, I think, 30 years. He's got over 300 papers published, him alone. This has just consumed him. And we're fortunate. The U.S. Olympic team, they have no qualms. They see the evidence, they use it. NFL, National Hockey League, the Phoenix Suns, and I think there's a lot more going on because it's effective and everybody wants an edge. They want their secret sauce. And of course, thousands of plastic surgery and med spas and skincare centers and gyms are all using this for their patients and for their clients because it supports their overall goal. And of course, I'm going to assume their overall goal, and you should too, is to look better, to be healthier, and to do it on a regular basis that is sustainable financially. Not everybody can spend $20,000 a week, but I bet most people can spend $5 a week. That is sustainable. So red light therapy is very effective, and so much so that 2015 was the International Year of Light and Light-Based Technology. We are a growing and aging population with ever rising healthcare needs. Many of us, especially the developed worlds, we are having fewer children, we're having children later in life, and we're expecting better quality of life and longer life. And all of that to be supported, red light therapy is the most perfect adjunct to a life lived in a modern day. Also, imagine if this was inserted for a third world country. Imagine what this could do at the village level. It's just encouraging, especially given the cost being so low. But it does require an electrical source, and therein lies a pain point. So red light therapy, or photobiomodulation, or PBM, it's an emerging, cost-effective treatment. Cancer, particularly solid tumors, really respond well to this. And eye diseases, age-related macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma, retinitis pigmentosa. So other red light therapies that are effective, central nervous system diseases like Alzheimer's disease, there's some great research going on. We're still trying to narrow that down to what responds unequivocally, but the research is so encouraging. Seems to be related to the flash or the hertz, matching that with the brain, which is the brain vibrates at a 40 hertz. And so having red light, that also vibrates at a 40 hertz. And that being something that is exposed to the brain through the eyes and through other means seems to be very encouraging. Cancer, again, especially solid tumors, like I mentioned in the last slide, heart attacks, they respond very well. Traumatic brain injury, my heavens, because of all of the Gulf War and the way that modern warfare does not involve face-to-face. It's IEDs, it's other forms of distance warfare, traumatic brain injury or TBI. They are so prevalent in our returning veterans, and getting them back into living. It's showing great promise. And I know that there's a number of universities and research centers around the country, around the US, who are doing this. Stanford is one of them. Parkinson's disease, interesting. That is also showing great promise. Vascular diseases, atherosclerosis, heart attacks, like I mentioned, restoring blood circulation, angiogenesis, getting more blood capillaries growing and growing into parts of the body that previously had reduced circulation, and restoring cellular respiration through the blood to those parts of the body that didn't have any. Wound healing. Again, cellular respiration, ATP. It's for repair. And the red light therapy, it's also got some very interesting applications. We're discovering it for its use in psychiatric disorders. The brain is such a, excuse the term, a black box. We still don't know how it works. It's still such this magnificently complex organ. We are still so ignorant of how it works, but this is showing some amazing responses. Burn injury, again, it's promoting healing. Arthritis, and there's many different types of arthritis, but as a disease, it does respond, whether it's degenerative, whether it is a immune response, because certain types of arthritis are autoimmune. So it still responds, very anti-inflammatory. Again, wound healing, seasonal affective disorder, just so much more. Now here's a very uncomfortable thing for some people to hear, but I'm gonna say it because it doesn't get said enough. Diseases of women, especially things like vulval diseases, and that is so specific and so ignored. And in many cases, it's simply there hasn't been enough good therapy that doesn't end up having, the treatment induces other problems. Well, light therapy is showing great promise, photobiomodulation, in treating various vulval diseases. It increases sex hormones when it's exposed in the testes for men. We know that, and that is wonderful. Again, we're not looking at any nutritional support. We're looking at maximizing the body's own health and responses. And it's really great because you can be taking other forms of medication and this will not interfere with it. You will not have a drug interaction with red light therapy and anything else you may be taking. For strokes, fantastic, because you're seeing a restoration, a stimulation of the nerves, the nerve cells. So this is again restoring damage, and this would support other forms of therapy for stroke. So again, it's just adding to the toolbox available to the therapeutic team. Treatment of psoriasis, again, highly inflammatory, horribly uncomfortable. Quite a bit of social issues and stigma for psoriasis, and this is so fantastic for it. Makes the person feel more comfortable, reduces or eliminates it altogether, and oh my heavens, just so helpful to a person to get their life back. And then of course nerve pain, and this is a very interesting thing. Again, it goes back to strokes. Many strokes can result in people having prolonged pain in the area where there has been a damage to the nerves from the stroke and where it occurred. So nerve pain from various nerve syndromes, damage from a really bad contusion or a rip and a tear in a knee or a shoulder or something. Something that cascaded into a nerve syndrome like complex regional pain syndrome. Very effective in treatment of this. And anti-aging, let's get to that. So, yeah, red light therapy is exceptionally good for the skin. Remember the lower absorption of the red light spectrum in the 660s? Well, that absorbs into the skin just a few millimeters. But it's in those few millimeters that we're looking at where the beauty, strength, and firmness of our skin exists, and that's what's being influenced. So the anti-aging benefits, increasing in skin tone, firmness, elasticity. So don't mix up collagen and elasticin. You need both, and they do different things, and they benefit each other. They compound the benefits, reducing wrinkle and lines by doing all those other things. Skin tone, firmness, elasticity. Healing DNA repair from sun exposure and free radical damage. Just fantastic, because we all have it to some degree. It also is renowned for growing hair and activating the growth cycle of the hair follicle. So you're kick-starting that hair follicle, so that the growth phase is activated, and you're also providing the nourishment and the means to make the best use of the nourishment in your body. So just so much. And it improves the appearance of stretch marks and scars. It doesn't remove them entirely, it just makes them better. And that is the truth. There are limitations. But this is still a tremendous, I'll take improvement any day. And among the other things, when we're talking about appearance, is also anti-aging benefits, including weight loss. It's very anti-inflammatory, and we know that getting older, there's a lot of fat that accumulates around the midsection, and that is not good. So this is what we're noticing, is the weight loss, especially in the tummy area. It's reducing the redness, which is the inflammation and an overstimulation of the capillaries when there's been irritation. It reduces that, and it promotes a more even skin tone. Again, a whole bunch of different responses within the skin, all complementing each other. And it plumps up the skin. Again, we're looking at an intake of healthy fluids into the cells, into the mitochondria, the expulsion of waste, the taking in of nutrients, the creation of energy, and repair and progress. And the skin, of course, shows. Enhancing the benefits of any skincare ingredients that you're taking, it definitely does. Just the way that, what would be a good analogy? You deciding to eat leafy greens and then deciding to eat organic leafy greens. It's good, but the organic just makes it better. And it's the same idea. It just enhances. And of course, laser lipo. And the laser lipo is, of course, used for releasing a lot of the waste products from within the cells in the interstitial tissue, that area between the cells and the fatty tissue. So it kind of makes it all softer, more easy to get at. And then the regular conventional lipo goes in afterwards as a second wave to vacuum out, as your doctor is skillfully and artfully pulling it out. But because of the laser going in first and softening everything up, and getting the cells to expel the wastes. It's just enhancing and making a much more effective and a better looking and better healing results. So it is a secret weapon, although it's not so secret. Professional and serious athletes have been adding this to their training program for a while. Remember when the down in Sao Paulo, the Olympics, various Olympic teams were carting down their huge laser beds for the whole team to use. No one was talking about it, but it was right there. And it was the open secret. But they've been doing this for a long time. Now, there are some benefits and there are some drawbacks. And this is where we're still studying the effects on athletes and the different wavelengths, the different ways to use it. So it does increase their time at a high intensity exercise before the muscle gets fatigued. That's great. It does increase their level of performance. Decreases the buildup of lactic acid, which is what causes your sore muscles. And it's after high intensity exercise. It's lots of lactic acid. And it significantly lowers the creatinine kinase levels. And this CK, or creatine kinase, is an enzyme marker of muscle breakdown. So it's pretty easy to measure just in blood serum. And then when we measure that after significant exercise, and then the use of red light, we're seeing really low levels. So we know that the muscle is not breaking down as long as we hit it with the red light after an intense workout. And these are athletes who are doing physical activity beyond normal. This is world class. So I mentioned earlier that athletes benefit from the red light by it's called reversing mitochondrial dysfunction. And we talked about how the nitric oxide, as important as it is, when there's too much of it in the wrong place, stopping the electron transport chain within the mitochondria, stopping that dead. And so there's no ATP production from that. And this reverses that, shocks it into activity. And also it induces heat shock protein, which is for an anti-inflammatory response. Our bodies are designed for this. Happy, comfortable living does not make for well-toned athletes. It promotes muscle growth. This is what the red light therapy does for serious athletes. It increases oxygen, getting that to the muscles. And it's, again, I'll mention it, strong anti-inflammatory response. And inflammation is the source of all illness. Okay, I hope you have found this helpful. And I've actually written a review and a bit of an article on combining red light therapy and NAD plus supplements, because they have a common pathway biochemically, and it's through the mitochondria. So I hope you found this useful. Please check out my review, and it's kind of a white paper, even though it's also review embedded. I just got carried away with all of the documentation and the techno, because I'm a wonk and I love it. And I hope you do too. Check it out. Thanks for listening. This is Mrs. Product Reviews. Over and out. Bye.